Okay, I think we're ready to go. I think there's people in the audience. Great. So as I said, I'm Travis Woodward from S&P Global. Um, Today's webinar is in lead up to our World Hydrogen Asia event, July 8th to the 10th in Tokyo. So we hope all of you will join, and we hope that this webinar will give you a taste of what you'll experience. We have our esteemed panelists here from across many of our different panels that we'll be having over the 2 days of plenary sessions. There's a training day on the 8th as well. We hope you will consider joining that as well. We have on our panel today, we have Andi Nakamura, who is our in-house analyst from S&P Global. She covers the hydrogen markets across Asia. We have Naveen Alawat from Jindal Steel and Power. He's the head of Power to X, Green Hydrogen, Green Steel, Gasification Projects, and CCSU, so very busy man. Then we have Mathieu Jayes from HTF Energy. He's a director in the Asia Pacific region. We have Luis Kim from ING Bank Seoul Branch, who's the director of Sustainable Solutions. And then finally, we have Akira Yabumoto from J-Power, where he is the executive officer for strategy for global energy markets and policy, hydrogen, and CCUS projects. So very happy to have all of you on our webinar today. Andy, why don't you start off giving us the house view of how S&P Global sees the markets, and just can you introduce the research product just very quickly?
Yes, absolutely. Probably some of you might be wondering why S&P Global's there as well. So particularly for those who are very familiar with world hydrogen leaders. So let me introduce that as well. So thank you for, we've got fantastic attendance today. So thank you everyone for their time to listen, and also the panel of esteemed experts that we have here today. So just quickly, as Travis said, I'm based in Tokyo and I coordinate Asia Hydrogen Research at S&P Global Commodity Insights. And I will actually be speaking and leading some of the sessions at the event as well. So I hope to see many of you there. So S&P Global, which World Hydrogen Leader is now a part of, we provide ratings, benchmarks, analytics, and data that can support businesses make their decisions. And as part of there are 5 groups there, and part of that there is commodity insights, and we specialize in energy and commodity information through cutting edge analysis and also market data and modeled data. And then inside there, we also have the energy transition and clean energy technologies, which the low carbon hydrogen is under. And this is the group that I belong to. And what we do in this group is we essentially leverage insights and expertise of not only the hydrogen experts within our team, but also from the other commodities team within the commodities insights to frame really hydrogen markets may develop in future. We essentially do this through monitoring market activities such as projects, infrastructure developments and offtake agreements. We also track policies and technology developments, and we also model demand, cost data, trade flows and so forth, and try and paint the picture there. So that's us there. So today, I'd like to spend a little bit of time just to set the scene, and in case you're not familiar with the hydrogen end-use market, share some of our house views, and then pass you on to the panel of experts. So today we're talking about end uses of hydrogen, and there really are many. You've got a chart there, and we are focusing on the far right end use section. So hydrogen has always been used in the industry, especially in ammonia production, and also in refining, especially with more limitations around SOx, and also need for or the commercial need to crack heavier fuels to gain lighter fractions. And these hydrogen traditionally came from fossil sources, and there was quite a bit of CO2 that was produced in the process of making H2. But this is some of the uses that can be substituted by cleaner hydrogen. There are other uses. So, for example, back in 1970s, when hydrogen first attracted attention for transportation because of oil shock, it was very much about passenger mobility. And nowadays, we also talk about the application of hydrogen and their derivatives in shipping and also in aviation as well. And more recently, as the markets look to decarbonize their energy systems, as well as more importance being placed in energy security, hydrogen is gaining more attention in hard-to-abate sectors like steel and heavy transport, and also in power and heating in markets which may not have enough renewables or want to moderate the fluctuation of available renewables, especially as they especially the fraction of renewable energy generation increases. And while the integration of low carbon hydrogen in industries can be drop-in service, other applications may need to have the end use technologies developed, and these studies are happening around the world. And then with this backdrop, it's no surprise that today we see most offtake agreements are concentrated in incumbent sectors and in industry. So this is the data that we collect through our offtake database, and we see this for both blue, so the natural gas hydrogen with CCS, and green, so the renewable hydrogen, in types of offtakes that we call both binding and non-binding agreements. So there's about 8 million tons equivalent hydrogen equivalent per annum that's on this binding and non-binding offtake agreements today, which is actually quite a significant fraction of the worldwide industrial consumption of hydrogen, which is about 95 million tons. So it's about 7% there. Of these offtake agreements, almost 80% are looking to be used in refining and in chemical feedstocks such as ammonia. And just a quick note of how we track these. So this comes from our offtake database, and we track basically heads of terms, letters of invitation, memorandum of understanding, announcements of agreements, as well as projects with integrated developers in clean hydrogen and their derivatives production. We first assign this. If we can assign this to another set of project database we track, we call it. We put it into this database as non-binding, and once there are some announcements, we call it binding, just in case you were wondering how these were tracked. And then just on a couple of the other use case sections. So we also see offtake agreements for mobility. When we say mobility, when we look at the mobility numbers, actually, the largest number of projects is road transportation, but actually shipping is the largest volume of hydrogen equivalent split between ammonia and methanol. Then we have some applications for power and gas grid, but these are mostly either to Europe or Asia Pacific, and Europe being end use in hydrogen, and Asia Pacific mostly looking at ammonia. And then we also have sort of this other end use sectors, and that includes the mixed uses and unannounced end uses, which can happen even at the times of memorandum of understanding. So from the previous chart, we established that the incumbent sector and I suppose the drop-in sector in particular has the largest offtake activity today. So does that really carry to the future? And is this also where the biggest demand driver is? We did a study last year looking at Japan when we were assessing the likelihood of Japan achieving the volume goals specified in hydrogen strategy, which was, I think, 20 million tons per annum by 2050. Now, what you're looking at here, it's a bit of a complicated chart, but x-axis is the market size of hydrogen in hydrogen equivalent for different applications, and those are in units of million metric tons per annum. And this is in just focusing on Japan. And on the y-axis, we have break-even carbon prices for each of the application. This is essentially the carbon pricing that you need to achieve to make these projects make financial sense. It's probably worth noting that This is actually looking at the fuel cost only, and it doesn't actually look at the modification cost on the user side. So with those caveats there, I think what we can see here is some of the applications that we were talking earlier, like industrial applications. They sit on the far left side, so the far bottom side, where essentially you don't need these high carbon prices. For the project to make sense. But you can also see, especially in Japan, that this application is actually quite small size of the overall potential market. It really shows how big the utility markets can really play, and what happens in this space may set the picture, scene for the picture, the scene for the future. And also probably it's worth noting that I think I've slightly mentioned before, but this chart does not take into the end use adaptation or the technology readiness level. So, for example, e-methane currently sits at two sort of very high carbon prices is required, but also quite large potential market. I think this one, there's still quite a lot of appetite to develop this particular use case because of its ability to fit in with essentially it's a drop-in solution to decarbonize city gas grids, and also it fits in with the infrastructure today. On the other side, the hydrogen is still quite experimental, and I think we have a specialist here today, so we'll hear more about it. And the actual initial capital overlay may be quite expensive. So, to dig into some of these intricacies, I will hand back the stage to Travis and our panel of experts to start the discussion. So, take it away,
Great.
Travis. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for that. I had a few questions. I don't see
Sure.
agriculture in here, and obviously agriculture for the incumbent sector is quite big. Where does agriculture fit in as an end use
Yeah,
in?
sure. So in a previous chart where we had the industry, we don't necessarily. So let me just go back one. Now that one, the previous chart did not actually specifically include specifically separate the ammonia use for agriculture and the rest of the industries. Now, when we're looking at this chart, this is a chart specific to Japan. So it's somewhat contained within industrial ammonia, but actually a lot of Japan's ammonia production itself is in plastics sector. So I believe that apart from we don't produce as much food for ourselves, I think some of the ammonia actually comes into the country already as a fertilizer. So I think that's why you don't see it in this chart.
Okay. And to that point, so this chart shows Japan. How would you say that the end uses are going to play out in our forecasts across the rest of Asia? And how is Japan and Asia different from other parts of the world?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we expect sort of the relative order of the break-even cost itself not to change so much depending on where it is in Asia. I think what will change is exactly where it sits in terms of the break-even carbon prices and also the available market size. So I think that industrial ammonia would expand significantly once you start including in rest of Asia, and also in places like China, especially where I think in Chinese market they not only they were actually capable of producing renewable hydrogen for quite a lower price, they also have relatively high natural gas price. So I think in those places you may see that break-even carbon price to be lower for yes, lower. And then for some countries, particular markets may not necessarily come into their minds either. For example, only select countries look at e-methane in city gas grids. One of the reasons why Japan looks at it is because it's such a important infrastructure during the times of the natural disasters, and not thankfully not all of the world is subjected to frequent earthquakes as we are here. So I think there's some of that security importance may change into what is applicable in which market.
And just finally, I see quite a wide spread in the levelized cost of hydrogen, or the break-even price as we're calling it. Do you want to maybe just very quickly explain some
Absolutely.
of that?
Sure, sure. So there is so the spread within the a singular application is due to where we see like the potential costs of hydrogen supply to be in Japan in 2040s, I think it is, in at the minimum level and the upper levels. I think the actual cost is listed on the bottom of the chart. In terms of hydrogen, we're looking at something like 3.4 kilograms per hydrogen up to about 7. And for ammonia, we're looking at about 450 up to 1100 metric tons of ammonia. So it all depends on, where it comes from. And obviously, there's some quantity distribution available depending on which region develops which project.
Great. So why don't we move to Yabumoto-san? So we see you right in the middle there with ammonia for coal power.
Right.
Yeah, why don't you explain a little bit what does J-Power see as the opportunity for co-firing ammonia? What role does hydrogen play in the power system itself? And do you feel that Japan is somewhat unique in focusing on hydrogen use in the power
Mhm.
sector? And why do you think that is?
Yes, actually, that J-Power is a power generating company based in Japan, and we have large coal-fired power plants in Japan. So our corporate target is decarbonizing those operations by 2050. That is one thing. But in general, that for the electric power system, we still need dispatchable capacity to accommodate more variable renewables. As variable renewable expand, we need more dispatchable capacity. And it should be like a gas-fired power, coal-fired power, that kind of things. But anyway, ultimately, those dispatchable capacity also need to be decarbonized. In this sense, that decarbonized low-carbon fuel should be introduced to that section. And dispatchable capacity is very important to stabilize the electric power system because it's provide flexibility to the system and also more technically that can the power generation facility provide inertia and the synchronization. That will be also that very important factor to stabilize electric power supply. So that's why that we are trying to introduce, and also that many other utility companies are interested in introducing low carbon hydrogen, low carbon ammonia to the power sector. That's my view.
Great. And do you think Japan is somewhat unique in focusing on the ammonia in the power sector compared to other countries in Europe and in the United States?
Yeah, actually, maybe that it's unique especially compared to Europe. Europe, in general, that they are phasing out all the coal-fired plants, so that they in Europe they don't have an option to introduce a low-carbon ammonia at the existing coal-fired power plant. But still, they may think about the hydrogen power generation to accommodate more renewables. In general, that the hydrogen is regarded as just for the decarbonization for the hard to abate sector. But in Japan, of course, also in Japan, that the government thinks and we believe that hydrogen or low carbon ammonia is very important to decarbonize hard to abate sector, but also important to decarbonize the existing power system. So in this sense, that we're maybe a little bit unique because that we still think about the orderly transition from existing power system to decarbonized and stable power system. So in this sense, that maybe that's unique, but it's a very natural step, I think.
And why do you think the Japanese government has put so much significant emphasis on these end use cases compared to maybe other countries in Asia and the world?
I just guessing, but in my feeling that I think that there are 2 points. One is, of course, that the for the energy security, electricity security is getting more important than before. So, because that electricity is very essential energy source for the every sectors. So in this sense, that the Japanese government think about the very important to secure the electricity system in a very orderly manner, as I mentioned. The another thing is the very unique characteristics of power sector usage is the volume. So everybody talked about the scaling up of hydrogen value chain. So like last several years. So in this sense, the power sector usage will provide huge volume of demand at the same time. For example, it's just illustrative. So if that we think about coal-fired 20% coal-firing at the 1 gigawatt of coal-fired power plant, it will need like 500,000 tons, just one unit. So it creates a huge volume of the demand. So it will also that they help to create a new value chain because it's not the volume of diversification of existing from the existing value chain. So in this sense, it will help to scaling up.
And what do you think has been the most difficult challenge in incorporating ammonia into the power sector, and what are the strategies for J-Power to overcome some of those challenges?
Yes, obviously that not only for the power sector but for all sectors, the hydrogen, ammonia is very, very expensive, especially as a fuel. So, for example, compared to the ordinary conventional, steam coal, the low carbon ammonia is still the 4 times higher in terms of cost. So, how to fill the gap? That is the first challenge. And also that is to respond to that challenge, the government is providing CFD support, and its application has ended by the end of March, and also that we need sustainable supporting mechanism or justification of introducing that kind of very expensive fuel to the power sector, because still the power sector is and like other sectors, we are facing very severe competition with the other generation sources. So we need to justify the usage of that very expensive fuels, and also that if, as I mentioned, if that the value, the different type of value, not just the energy, but different type of value like accommodating the renewables, providing flexibility to grid, we need to have the kind of different type of market design to accommodate that kind of usage.
Great, thank you for that. Luis, why don't we speak with you next? Obviously, we've heard that using ammonia in the power sector is very expensive. What kind of projects are coming across your desk that you think are most likely to reach, final investment decision? And what would make ING make that FID in the end, regardless of the higher or lower cost?
So I think I need to divide the project that's coming into my colleagues in Europe versus like myself.
That's a very good point.
Because obviously totally different things as well. But just maybe some people will be quite curious why banks are carrying this is relatively new technology. So is it like, are they already in the bankability stage? So for ING, energy transition is the core part of our strategy, not just for energy clients. As Annie already mentioned, that hydrogen can be used for multiple purposes. So even for any type of company, they are in a way directly or indirectly relating to the development of hydrogen. So, and also if you're considering a lot of company in APEC, most of the time they are considered as conglomerate, meaning they have multiple divisions, multiple businesses. So there is at least one division having some links to energy and some other hard topic sectors as well. So this is clearly key area for APEC clients. Hence, we want to support our clients' energy transition strategy. So that's kind of the opening kind of talk why banks are interested in hydrogen as well. And among many end users, because the banks at the end, they have financial modeling and they need to actually end up with some type of risk kind of adjusted return. So the end uses that can be more clear in terms of commercial perspective, also having more advanced technology is tested by either Europe or US would be more bankable in APEC as well. So for example, like clean hydrogen primarily targeting the use in hard-to-abate industrial sectors, such as refining, or ammonia or methanol production can be example. The reason why is that they already use gray hydrogen. So if you are replacing that with either ideally green or even blue ammonia, that's also beneficial for the sustainability purposes as well. So this would be the one area. And the other sectors would be like steel and cement. For example, for steel, we already had some project in Europe, like based on green steels that ING supported as well. But it's less in APEC, but we are hoping that that will be the one area that's coming closer to the APEC regions as well. Or the other one that could be interesting, I'm just thinking about APEC as a region, because we have like Korea, Japan, Australia, and some other countries as well. So there are some countries with more kind of like capacity on renewables. So they are interested in producing hydrogen and exporting to the other countries across them. So this type of project can be relatively large in scale. So that would be suitable for banks, or sometimes there is blended finance ideas. So there will be some kind of loss kind of cushion from multinational banks or even government as well. So that kind of structure is quite critical for us. So it's not just about the specific end use, it's also about the structuring of the deal for banks to consider whether it will be bankable or not.
I spent a significant amount of time in the solar sector, and I remember in the early days, a lot of financiers were having difficulties with bankability because of very unique circumstances to that sector. For example, a lot of the solar manufacturers were young, and they didn't want, they wanted reinsurance on the asset because the panel manufacturer could go bankrupt and not be able to replace them. So I'm wondering if there's different concerns like that are, because these are new sectors that the finance industry is starting to get comfortable with in the different end uses. Do you think you can speak to that?
So maybe it's just coming back to the European cases for the green steel. So even though it was European deals, the structure was like really solidly kind of protected with multiple participants like providing equity and the mezzanine, and banks like ING typically joining the senior loan. So because of the risk appetite. And also there was ECA financing structure, like supporting typically 80 to 90% of loss in case something happened from these government-backed insurance companies as well. So these would be the typical cases for this relatively young technology. And the other thing that's quite critical from our side is that if something happens as a failure within this region, that can actually drag the development of this hydrogen for a really long time. So we are sometimes saying that we really need to be successful for couple of early projects to showcase to the wider kind of market audience, this is something you can support as well. So that's why we put a lot of clauses that might not be that familiar to some of those kind of like these developers in APEC as well. So that's why I was mentioning as well. Some projects can be actually done locally, then they can use local language, they can use their local law, and they can actually finalize their financial arrangement. But if you are involving international banks, like there is another type of law and legality and another terms that can be also kind of like another step forward. We need to have kind of like the standardized format that's including both domestic and the international financials as well. And that's taking a lot of time, not just for hydrogen, it's for like offshore wind and some other energy project. And also uncertainty and the longer project time. And also this government subsidy that can also be changed depending on political situation. That's also added kind of risk as well.
Yeah, and considering how broad the different end uses are in hydrogen, it's probably difficult to come up with like a standard approach
Yeah,
to all the different
true.
end uses. So that's very interesting. Naveen, why don't we turn to you next? Where is the opportunity for low carbon steel production for Jindal Steel? And then can you also speak to Luis mentioned conglomerates, and I know that Jindal Steel is collaborating with another Jindal company on the renewable energy for sourcing the power to incorporate in making your steel. Do you think that's a key part of Jindal Steel's approach and having that conglomerate relationship in sourcing the renewables and the power for generating the hydrogen?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. So let me just go step by step on the first question. You ask about the opportunities. I think there are enough opportunities for low carbon emission steel and potentially converging into the green steel in India and outside India. Outside India, there is absolutely a great opportunity, especially coming from the pull is coming from Europe, where we clearly see a demand of close to 100 odd million ton of low carbon emission steel by 2030. If we take the worst case scenario, we'll be able to, there will be a potential demand of close to 50 odd million tons. If we take the announced capacities in Europe, at the max, we see that 10 to 15 odd maximum million ton is going to come from Europe. And so there is a clear opportunity of 35 odd million tons of low carbon emission steel that will come from China, from Middle East, and from India. So that is absolutely an opportunity. Within India, recently, the Ministry of Steel, they have announced the green taxonomy, where they clearly defined, I think probably India is the only country in the world where they have clearly defined the definition of low carbon emission steel. And also there is a public procurement policy being announced where the government is going to spearhead the offtake of the green steel or low carbon emission steel. So the overall structure of the low carbon emission steel has been divided into three star ratings. What they say star ratings: the 3-star rating, 4-star, and 5-star. 3-star rating will have a carbon intensity from 2.2 tons of CO2 per ton of steel to 2 tons. So 2 to 2.2 tons, that will fall under 3-star. From 2 tons to 1.6 tons, that will fall under 4-star, and less than 1.6 ton of CO2 per ton of steel will fall under 5-star rating. And government has mandated that they are going to spearhead the offtake, where they have identified a close to a demand of 3 odd million tons under 3-star, close to 1.2 million ton under 4-star, and close to 0.35 to 4 million ton under 5-star. So this is actually a very good step to first define what exactly is low carbon emission steel, and then mandating that yes, government is going to make 5% to 7% odd sourcing of their green steel, because India has to become a developed country by 2047. So a lot of infrastructure has to be built, the ecosystem has to be built. In the entire sourcing of steel is going to be the main pivot for this infrastructure building, right? In that, if they can take 5 to 7% low carbon emission steel, that requirement is going to be humongous. So that is, I think, the right strategy to really accelerate or kickstart this low carbon emission steel. So in India, there is going to be a potential, and outside India, especially from Europe, there will be a huge potential. So the idea, so India, as we stand at a very important, very pivot point in terms of accelerating and seizing this opportunity within India and outside India.
That's great.
Yes.
And I'll get back to the second question I asked you in just a minute. We saw in Andy's picture, and I realized that was for Japan, that hydrogen for steel was quite competitive in terms of pricing. How are you seeing that in India? Is it getting close to parity with gray? Is there still a big gap? What are the challenges in commercializing the green steel?
No, I think the basically two important basically challenges are first is actually the carbon, the maturity of the carbon pricing market. I think that is where it is still in the draft phase. Within 5 to 6 odd months, we believe that the carbon pricing will be coming. The policy is going to come. That will really accelerate, because that is where I think the moment you start rewarding the low carbon emission product manufacturer and start punishing the highly carbon basically polluting industries, it will accelerate the overall, because the moment you start taking the carbon prices in your overall project model, most of the things will start making sense, right? That is one. Second is the willingness to pay by the end consumer. So that is the second thing. I think that will government accelerating the overall offtake, and then more and more mandates coming from the automobiles, from the wind sector, from the consumer durables, because most of the companies, they have multinational basically domain DNA in their place. So if it is not if Mercedes is going to start reducing, or they started taking pledges of reducing their carbon intensity globally, then India will be taken in isolation, right? So overall there will be a pull of demand, basically. So that is where I think these are the two important factors. And as we see, these two factors are going to go mature. They will be getting mature as we move forward in next 5 to 6 months, and that is where this thing will start moving. So that's the on the challenge part. But on the coming to the basically the hydrogen prices in India, I think it is still hovering around 3.5 to 4 odd dollar per kg. But one of the main important actually the building block, that is basically the cost of, or the levelized cost of energy. I think that is where the India is definitely taking huge strides as we move forward, huge strides. And then this is where, because 70% of the cost, it is going to come from basically electrons, the green electrons. And here actually recently concluded auction, we have achieved basically a price of close to 3.5 odd cents, for 16 hours, 17 hours. And as we move forward, these prices are dropping. When you talk about the total installed cost of solar, wind, batteries, I think everything, electrolyzers, the electrolyzer system is also coming up in a huge way in India. And we believe that in next 1 odd years, there will be gigawatt of electrolyzer ecosystem that will be developed in India. So I think we stand at a huge basically sweet spot in terms of really getting these electrons at the lowest possible cost. And from there on, I think it is just a matter of reduction. So I think we believe that in next 1 odd years, we will be coming to a level of 2.2 to 2.4 dollar per kg, or a sub $3 per kg. And thereon, I think with the mandates coming from the government, especially from the refinery sector, from the fertilizer sector, and then adoption of green steel taxonomy, I think there will be a viability gap funding on the supply side and on the demand side. With all these supports coming from the government, I think I see a huge offtake or uptake of demand going forward.
You mentioned the different star levels of steel, and that would probably be something that would be very something created by the Indian government. How does that work, though, when you're exporting the steel, if you're producing for a certain standard and then you need to export it? And how is the policy being harmonized across the different regions that you're considering exporting to?
Yeah, so that is still work in progress, because in Europe you have the CBAM. So a different definition of basically green steel is coming, low carbon emission steel. So I think this harmonization is going to take time, because 2026 CBAM is going to be kick-started. So that is where I think that is also one of the key challenge as we move forward, how we can harmonize all this verification and all these offtakes. So I think this is a work in progress. And in India, though there is a definition, but we have to also sort of harmonize or align it with the final definition or standard of the consumers, because most of the consumers are sitting in Europe. So I think this is a work in progress. We see that there will be an alignment, and as we move forward, there will be more sort of streamlining that will be done.
Great. And then just last question, I asked you about your tie-up with the Jindal Power Company. How important is that strategy and for bringing down cost, and is that a model that can be replicated by other companies for these kind of end uses?
No, I think it's a great question. See, for us, it is very simple that one of the key drivers that we have identified as a roadmap as a company is to start with 50% use of renewable energy or renewable power, and then ultimately converging or making it 200% renewable power. Because, the hydrogen vector, as we have just discussed, that is going to take a bit of time. So before that, operation excellence, energy excellence, and use of renewable power can definitely take us to 15 to 20% reduction in the carbon intensity. And that actually is one of the key enabler for us. So how it is, we strongly believe that if we can do the procurement of the construction, that is our model, where we have our owner engineer and construction management. We take it from the services, we take it from outside contractors, and procurement construction, we do it ourselves. And this strategy is really help us actually thus far, and going to help in future as well, where it will help us in two ways. Number one, it will help us to reduce or optimize the project cost by 15 to 20 odd percent. That's a huge number. Second, it is also have a full control on the overall execution, project execution, because speed is definitely going to play an important role, right? Because everybody knows the answer. The company who can really put it on the ground as fast as possible, they are the one who will be benefited in the long run. So with that as mind, we have our basically subsidiary with the name of Jindal Renewables. They have been mandated tasked to supply us over the fence electrons, green electrons, to power our steel operation across India. And we have signed a long-term, basically a PPA, power purchase agreement with them. And we believe that this is a super model where it can help us to supply us to ensure the round-the-clock electrons, and also to monitor, because we also have a strong say. We can also help us to manage their working capital, and also help us to manage their project as well, if in case they are facing any issues, the things they are on critical path together, because the connectivity is a huge issue at the point of origin and at the point of use as well. So if we collaborate, do the project together, I think a lot of issues, all these interfacing issues, can be resolved in a much more effective way.
Great. I encourage all of you to, all the participants to ask questions. We'll get to them after we finish with Matthew, who I'm going to speak to next. So please put in your questions in the chat, and we will respond to them afterwards. Great, Matthew. So we've talked to the finance, world. We've talked to the off-takers. Now let's talk to the producers. Where are you seeing the offtake for your hydrogen and derivative products that you're producing?
Well, that's a really good question, because
Or do you know?
we thought of takers, the projects won't materialize. So what we see is that on the long run is related to the trends which was shared earlier. Fertilizer companies, refineries, to do co-firing with coal or gas power plants. That's the long-term potential as a fuel also for heavy mobility. Now, the big question is, what do we do before 2030, 35, or 2040? All figures we see, I think on one slide it was mentioned mid-2040. So most of us will be retired by then. What we try to look at on our side is to identify on the very short term what projects can be materialized and where hydrogen brings a related value in the market. And so for us, it's a way to survive first, because we are not $1 billion corporate. And if we want to continue activity, we need to do real projects. Secondly, it's a way also to bring a learning curves in most of the markets by implementing real projects. And we see today in Asia Pacific that hydrogen can play a role in, firstly, in island grids, where hydrogen can be used as a storage component to maximize the integration of renewable energies. It's a bit similar to the approach with co-firing plants somehow. You can see that in Germany, you increase the amount of installed of wind, but meantime, you need to increase also the amount of peaking power plants, which today is mainly LNG. So if we want to decarbonize a fully grid, we need a green peaking power plants, and hence co-firing, which is a transition. So on island grids, what we will do is to produce the hydrogen locally and combine the renewable energies to the hydrogen storage in order to deliver a firm and stable power to the grid. Asia Pacific could be the main region to implement such projects because you have a lot of islands and isolated areas. In Pacific, obviously, many areas in Australia, in Japan. Japan, you have many islands, Kyushu, Okinawa, Tokyo Islands, Sado Islands. Most of those grids are diesel genset dependent. And then we have countries like Philippines and Indonesia, where it's full also of island grids. So to my view, if we want to implement concrete projects on the short term without subsidies or with a minimum amount of leverage, this can be a first step. So on our side, this is what we focus on. The second step could be related to the heavy mobility, especially related to the island. We can decarbonize the whole ecosystem. So while we address the power sector, we can also produce extra green hydrogen and mutualize the scale and the cost to decarbonize ferries. And we are working on such topic with IMO. We communicated a couple of weeks ago on a feasibility studies to decarbonize ferries on hybrids in Indonesia. So in a nutshell, this is how I see the first off-takers in the region, so the electric utilities.
So your end uses are island nations. I see that HDF in Asia is very much focusing on Philippines and Indonesia, which are, as you said, very heavily islanded countries. How is your strategy in Asia different from your European strategy? HDF is a French company. How is it different in Europe and Asia in terms of the end use and the strategy?
Well, the main difference are related to two topics. First, the geography, and secondly, the level of development. So in terms of geography, the beauty of Europe, so France included, is it's super packed. You have all those ecosystems near from one to another. You can develop the infrastructure in an easy way compared to Asia Pacific, and you have access to cheap renewable energies not that far away. North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Middle East also, pipelines can be implemented to transport the green molecule. So that is a game changer for Europe, and I think it's the only region worldwide where you have such dynamic offtake and cheap producer of hydrogen. In addition to that, in Europe, you have access to subsidies that you don't have in main countries of Asia Pacific. So France only, the country released the last update of the national hydrogen roadmap. Before it was 9 billion euro subsidies. Now it's a bit less. I think something like 7, if I'm not mistaken. But still, the amount of subsidies to the market is massive compared to Asia Pacific nations that when you put Korea, Japan, India, Singapore on the side, then the other ones won't be able to afford the transition the same way than those countries. So that's why the strategy will be different. In Europe, we will benefit of those supports and on the proximity with North Africa and Middle East.
And are you generally, for your activities in Asia, are you supplying to the end user on site, or are you producing it on one site and transporting it?
So what among the challenges we see for green ammonia and green hydrogen is the logistic. You need to set up new infrastructure. It's capital intensive. It's complicated enough to do that between Australia and Japan, for example. Imagine within a country like Indonesia or Philippines, it's unbearable. No one will finance those infrastructures and bring subsidies to make them affordable. So what we do is to produce everything locally, the hydrogen, to store it locally and to use it to make electricity locally also, or as a fuel for the local ports. So that's a way for us to tackle the logistic angle, because it won't be sustainable to transport the hydrogen. As I will make an analogy, if you look at most of those islands, and I include the one in Japan, look at LNG, how sustainable it is to deploy LNG in those islands. Most of the time is not, because there is no economy of scale, because you cannot amortize your investment on the infrastructure. So those islands, they remain diesel genset dependent. But tomorrow, it will be the same for the green molecule. So I believe that the solution will be for those small, medium scale consumer as an island. The main solution will be to produce locally to avoid that issue.
Yeah, definitely, especially if you're not using derivatives. Hydrogen right now, in terms of transport, is very expensive. I guess we can start with some Q&A. We have some questions here. Naveen, the first one is for you. How does the CBAM impact the green steel imports into the EU for Jindal?
I think the impact is definitely will be there in terms of basically the incremental the eventually the final cost that is going to the consumer because EU as per the CBAM, they are going to create the carbon intensity difference. Example, in Europe, if the average carbon intensity is 2 tons, in India it is 2.5 tons, so the differential 0.5 or 500 kilos equivalent ETS prices will be imposed on that. So increasing the ultimate, basically price to the consumer to whom will be sending the steel in Europe. Now, basically the impact is very minute to start with, but eventually, as we move forward, it will definitely be diluted because we also have our plans in place, and we believe that in next by 2030 we'll be able to reduce our carbon intensity by 10 to 15%. So initially, the end consumer has to sort of bear the brunt, but we see this as a more of an opportunity than having any challenge on this place, because it's a good warming up exercise, and it will really shaping us to really have an eye on the future.
Great, thank you. I guess, Andy, the next question would be for you. Can you share any update on the Japanese CFD if its results or outcome is released? My understanding is no, but maybe you have.
Yes, so the results is it may take a little bit more. I think so, as most people would know, the application for the CFD closed on the 31st of March this year, and then now they're in the process of effectively evaluating every one of those projects, making sure that the agency that is doing that is JOGMEC, and they're in the process of evaluating, making sure that what's being spoken about is realistic, and the cost of it is also reflected. And then with the Japanese CFD, it's slightly different from other countries in the sense that the main the limit or what they're working to is to a certain amount of allowances in terms of money, rather than targeting certain tonnage of hydrogen per annum, for example. So we really don't know until the results are released as to how many tons of hydrogen equivalent will be coming into the country either. The rumor has it probably 1 or 2 large scale projects if they can afford it, and some of the locally produced, locally consumed projects. But I think there are other things working as well. So for example, I think there's going to be some changes to the way that the gas is being costed. So for example, for e-methane or biomethane addition to the grid, there will be some cost pass-through laws that will be coming out this year that will make it more, essentially some of those costs will be shared amongst the country as opposed to a singular company who's trying to bring that in.
Do you think the results will be announced before our live event in July in Tokyo?
I think that might be a little bit difficult. I think I heard by the end of the year. Sometimes I'm not sure the end of the year is, like
Calendar
December
year.
or March. But I think it really depends. I think you could have maybe one project announced, but I'm kind of thinking it's a little bit difficult at this point in time.
Well, in any case, it's an exciting time for the
Mhm.
CFD scheme in Japan. It's all new and optimistic. There's another question here. How are the H2 plate will have the backup the renewable electric power energy? Battery is going to be very expensive. Does anyone think they can respond to that? Yeah,
Yeah,
Mitch.
I can bring. We see most of the people in the market try to antagonize batteries versus hydrogen, while there should be a room for both. Batteries are more and more competitive, and they are good for fast answers, and it can bring strong grid supports. But batteries cannot do long-term storage. And this is where hydrogen is coming with this ability technically to do unlimited storage and to be able to deliver power on demand, even on the long term. So for me, it's important to consider both and to not try to be binary by saying one or the other.
Great, thank you. There's another question here. There's been some pretty high profile, very large regional blackouts on the power grid in recent years. In a couple of years ago, there was a big one in Texas during a winter storm, and then everyone probably might remember the recent one in Spain. How do we think that this could be used as an opportunity for hydrogen solutions? Anybody? Feel free to respond.
Maybe I can add, because I'm not like technically expert on hydrogen technology, so I can be more representing the common views.
Sure.
So there is also rumor that this may not be because of renewable energy, but just put it
Well,
that
I was going to
aside.
say, I don't know if that's because of renewables, but
But I mean, if you're thinking about the nuclear energy, like 5 years ago, most of people hated nuclear energy. Now it's part of transitional activity in EU taxonomy, K taxonomy, and others, conditioned to some technological protections and safety issues. So the views can change. So we all now understand that energy is not just about the environment; it's also about the security and independence of those national, own kind of controlling their own energy. So in that regard, I think that unfortunate event was a good way of thinking us that there is no single kind of like ruling energy source that should, have everything in 2050. So hydrogen will have more maybe support and interest from people who are maybe not realizing this energy source yet. So.
Yamamoto-san, did you want to add something?
Yes. Yeah, almost the same issue because, again, that I'm not so sure about the real cause of
Yeah, I don't think we know the
initial
real
cause.
cause.
But in general, we still need dispatchable capacity, not only for the very short-term fluctuation, but also for the extreme days, very cold days, the cold spell experienced in the United States for some days, and also that the something like a seasonal variability. It depends on the atmosphere, that the geographical location, they're very different, and also that the interannual the variation, if heavily dependent on hydropower the country, and sometimes maybe that the experience can drought. So, and in this sense, that we still need a dispatchable capacity, not only for the that the coal and gas, but also that the nuclear or the other kind of things. So we need to combine various technologies, various sources of power generation. That could be, that can with that we can achieve the more resilient power system.
Great, thank you. We sort of talked about storage a little bit ago. There's a sort of a similar storage is challenging issue, and where does the panel see the future of storage technology? I mean, that's really the reason I think Asia is using so many derivatives, just because hydrogen itself is so hard to store. I don't know if any of you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I think maybe if I can just pitch in here, basically for the steel, especially the iron and steel sector, where we are maximizing our energy is to co-locate the electrolyzer along with the DRI plant, which can actually minimize the overall piping cost, the compressors. And yes, I think the storage part will definitely play an important role depending upon the geography. If we talk about India, I think the above surface tank will definitely play an important role, let's say close to 6 to 7 hours of storage. But then, yes, I think if we zoom into the Middle East, where we are also one of the largest in Oman, largest steel producer, there I think the geographic, because of the geographic terrains, the salt caverns and the below surface storage can also play an important role. But then in case we have to really move the molecules from, in case of ammonia and methanol, you have to definitely convert it into ammonia, methanol, and then recrack, especially for the Europe, because there is no other option there, right? So I think the cross-country pipeline will also play an important role. The common infrastructure is also going to play an important role if we have to really go for a mass deployment of hydrogen going forward.
Do you see a day in the next 10, 20 years where that restriction is not required to produce on site, where you do have a transportation infrastructure for, liquefied hydrogen that is affordable?
No, it is. I think a lot of plans are underway, but I think we all know that, there's so much of energy goes into liquefy hydrogen and then transportation, not a real or ideal way of approaching it. Even when we convert hydrogen into ammonia as well, 50% of efficiency goes into this. The landed price of hydrogen, basically goes by 35 to 40 odd percent. So I think we have to maximize co-locating is an important role, but I think transportation hydrogen, but I think the technologies are moving pretty fast, and we definitely see a breakaway happening basically in this. But I think we have to maximize and try to conserve the energy, try to maximize the use at the origin, or transport the things which are easy to transport. Like in our case, transporting hot briquetted iron (HBI) or transporting green steel make much more sense than transporting liquid ammonia.
Exactly. I guess we'll end with one more question because we're at the top of the hour. Did you want to add something, Andi?
No, just if I may add to that, I think our house view is exactly the same. So essentially, if you can co-locate, co-locating is the best. But it's just, we think it's effectively, it's not really the storage issue, but it's a transportation issue as to whether what derivative it ends up in, and it's for that reason that you do lose efficiency in every step of the way that you transform into something else. So just want that done.
That's a great addition. Thank you. I'll end the last question here. We're at the top. We're past the top of the hour a little bit. What benchmarks or offtake structures are emerging to support long-term hydrogen pricing in Asia? Maybe Luis, do you want to touch on that, or someone else?
Okay, is anyone can help me? Okay.
So,
it's not easy to say some cost, public
yeah, no,
speaking.
absolutely. So I can come at it from some policy angle here. So some of in terms of just the structures, what we saw in actually this Korean auction that happened last year. So we understand a lot of the offtake contract was essentially take or pay contracts. And one of the reasons apart from just the cost bar was probably a little bit too low for that South Korean auction. One of the reasons that perhaps some of the quoted costs were higher than we expected was to do with risks, and it was about the generator's risks to have to buy everything and not even having the produced electricity like guaranteed to be purchased by KEPCO. I believe that was the issue. So what we've seen so far is essentially a lot of the I think current contracts have been essentially some sort of indexed. If it's a green hydrogen, it's not really indexed to anything, potentially to inflation, but not a lot. And if it's blue hydrogen, it's usually indexed to gas price. There's a lot of questions around whether that is the right model or not, especially for green hydrogen, where costs of, although it's capital intensive, there is other things that can change as well in the course of 25, 30-year-old long project timeline.
So for that specific auction, it was only 11% subscribed, and everything that remained has been kind of carried over to this year. And so, as Edna said, there's no specific model, but there was some players actually comparing this with floating offshore wind. That was kind of early stage, the most expensive one. So trying to understand what it was the commercial, and unfortunately, they was not attractive enough, except for the one specific one.
Great. Well, we have to end it there. We still have some outstanding questions, but thank you everyone for joining today. I hope this gave you an idea of what to expect in our in-person event in Tokyo, July 8th to the 10th. I hope it has encouraged you to join us there, and we hope to see you very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.